And the seventh one, I'd like to welcome everybody here on this sunny evening. So thank you so much for being here to be involved in the walk or elsewhere. So welcome to the Housing and Environment and Scrutiny panel meeting to do. This is a hybrid meeting. So far, none of the panel members have joined us online, but should they do so, yes, I think someone has actually just joined us. I think Councillor Alexander is joining us online. So if anyone doesn't need to speak, then they please just put their hand up as they would do normally on an online meeting, and that'll be fine. I think we'll be will kind of be housekeeping sorted out. So we could go on to apologies for absence. I haven't heard of any apologies. Right, and so any urgent matters, I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Any matters to be considered in private, I'm not aware of any of those either. So declarations of interest, can I ask if any panel members would like to declare if you have any personal or prejudicial interest in any of the matters on the agenda? So we just look at the minutes of the last meeting on the 29th of June. That's where those minutes here. To speak up if there's something that's really to thing on the spot. So we'll look at page 1. Yes. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. I think that is agreed. There's also on there, there's also the recommendations. And so just do, just basically just do double check on that one that everyone is agreed on the recommendations there. So they can before the further forward in the scrutiny process and also go to the cabinet. That's good. Okay, thank you. So in that case, without further ado, what we have online, we've got Dawn Henry, the Assistant Director of Housing Asset Manager, who will be talking to us about the progress with housing safety. Quite an important area, which is very much in the news at the moment. So please do Dawn, welcome you to the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk to the report which is in the pack, and this the report is to provide an update on the progress that has been made with the housing safety compliance, and in particular the voluntary undertaking that we entered into with the regulator for social housing. So if I take you through the report, for those of you who may not be aware, I'll go through the background. In February 2022, we made a self-referral to the regulator for social housing. The reason for doing this was because we had found that we did not have any assurance across all of the big 5 areas. So that was fire, gas, electric, asbestos and water safety. We also added lifts to this list because it is an area that relates to health and safety and is considered to be a compliance area in social housing. So when we first met with the regulator, they found that we did not have any effective controls in place, in particular to our responsibility for fire safety, which post Grenfell has been of particular interest. In addition, we didn't have any monitoring for remedial actions, and that related much more to electrical, asbestos and water safety. Previous audit work that had been carried out gave no assurance for fire safety and only limited assurance across the other areas. So overall, that meant that the regulator found that the council was unable to provide complete assurance on the data accuracy for our health and safety function. So they ruled that we were facing a breach of part 1 of 1.2 of the Home Safety Standard, complying with all applicable health and safety requirements. The notice was published in May 2022, concluding what I have just mentioned. So that meant that we entered into a period there where we had to work closely with the regulator to be able to demonstrate what we were going to do about it and the progress over time. So the update on where we are at the moment, So we started with our initial recovery plan, and we were very clear whenever we started on this process that there was no quick fix. It was going to take a period of 2 to 3 years, and this is now reflected in the development of a longer rebuilding the housing service plan. We're 18 months into the programme, and we've recovered the initial, we've delivered the initial recovery plan, and we're now in the process of delivering the rebuilding the service. So we've worked very closely with ARC Consultancy, and more lately with PwC, our internal auditor. ARC throughout the process have been our critical friend, so they have been able to advise us, and also been able to advise the regulator on how we are conducting our progress and the recovery. The process that we've gone through recently is to undertake 2 independent reviews, one by means of audit and one in a wider piece of work that ARC have undertaken, and that was so that we would be able to confirm that the direction of travel is positive and that we're close to coming to a position where we would be able to ask the regulator to lift or remove the notice. So the PwC audit will look at the effectiveness of controls that are in place, and the ARC review will look, they will consider all of the health and safety assessments that we've undertaken, as well as the remedial actions. So they will test all the processes that we have and look for that evidence. So it'll be very much an evidence-based result that they will be looking for. So we are working through that, and the draft reports are expected imminently. With the work that's been undertaken in the last 18 months, we are expecting that both these reports will give the assurance that is needed, both internally within the council and externally to the regulator. So the areas that the reviews will focus on, I've listed out in the report. So they primarily concentrate firstly on leadership management and the capacity of the compliance team. So the initial review in 2020 identified that leadership was an area that needed significant improvement. They recommended that as part of the recovery plan, we established a vision for compliance management, and that we were also going to appoint a competent person who would have that single controlling mind and be able to give direction, strategic direction, as well as operational direction across all of the compliance areas in the landlord function. ARC also recommended at that time that we needed to develop new policies and procedures that were up to date, and that these were well communicated to our staff, and that staff would understand and be able to recognise where those were and how they came in to be. So in response to this, and in recognition of the issues that we were looking at, the whole of this situation was made a corporate priority, and the robust recovery plan was implemented and acted upon immediately. So the recovery plan, first of all, introduced changes to the management structure. We created a dedicated building safety team. So that was to reflect what we were actually trying to achieve, and a strong governance arrangement was put in place. And what this looked like was that we had a regular agenda item at the business board. We also had monthly meetings with the elected members on the Housing Safety Board. And in terms of the programme for recovery, we put in a governance structure around that. So that was overseen at a senior level by the Rebuilding the Housing Service Executive Board, and the performance and operational monitoring was carried out by the Housing Safety Programme Board, which was a group of peers from across the business who acted as the challenge and indeed did give that challenge. We've maintained our very open relationship with the regulator. We meet with them monthly, and we discuss with them the progress that has been taking place and is in progress. Policies have now all been updated and they are under periodic review with very clear roles and responsibilities having been identified, and the staff who are delivering the policy, the procedures, will be able to identify those themselves. Performance is scrutinised and service improvements are managed in a very clearly defined programme that is run by the Housing Programme Board. So we have monthly performance meetings internally across the operational teams, and that then the performance is scrutinised by both boards at that level. The capacity of the building safety team has been addressed with the creation of this new team. It is some 30 members strong. It is led by a head of building safety. There are 2 principal building safety managers, 9 housing building safety managers, and 10 building safety officers. It is also supported by a wider administrative team, and we are in the process of looking to recruit graduate apprentices as well. The team now has very clear direction. They have very strong operational objectives, and they're very committed to ensure that these are delivered. As an organisation, we have given a commitment to make sure that this team is as technically strong as we can possibly make it, and we have committed to put the whole team through the Chartered Institute of Building Level 6 Building Safety Manager professional qualification, and the first half of the team are already on that process, and the second half commence their course in November. In terms of data quality and effective use of information technology, again in 2022 it was identified that we just lacked complete vision of where we were with our data, and that was down to us not being able to have all of the information in one place that was easily accessible. So we moved very quickly to address that, and we have built a single comprehensive database that we manage all the risk related to the asset through that. We've completed a stock safety verification exercise where we were able to capture all risk components in the communal areas of all of our blocks. This information has been input into our housing management system and now underpins all of our performance reporting. The work on our system is ongoing and it's part of the wider 3-year programme, so we will continue to develop and improve and to streamline the information that we are gathering. We continuously data cleanse and reconcile all information back to what we believe is the one version of information. There were weaknesses in our system back in 2022. We had a huge reliance on spreadsheets, and that meant that we were always being exposed to the loss of data, inaccurate data being generated. And to deal with that, we've implemented a module called True Compliance, and that's an industry recognised compliance IT solution. We've been able to do this working very closely with the supplier, and that has ensured that the work that we did to get us to this point meant that we cleaned our data as effectively as we could, so that we were putting clean data into the system to begin with. The system does recognise errors. It's a very intuitive system, and it helps us dramatically with improving the accuracy of our reporting. It's cloud-based, which means that staff can access it through mobile working. So if they're on site, they're able to look and see what records about a particular block are available. They can check back on that to see what the last fire risk assessment may have said, or what the last electrical report may have said. As I said, we do recognise that we have more work to do, and we are developing an ICT blueprint for all of housing services, but primarily this area is one of the key drivers to do that. A main element of this is about how we need to rebuild our open housing system, which is the main housing management system that's used for across housing. And one of the things that we're working on is getting these two systems to talk to each other in both directions so that it will constantly be updated in live time. In terms of performance management and reporting, again, back in April 2022, we identified that we had a very basic and very underdeveloped approach to reporting. This has now dramatically changed. We have a robust performance management framework in place, and our reporting cycle is very functional. So from the team level right up to management level, all the staff can identify where we are with performance. We've completed all the actions that were identified in the initial recovery plan, and part of that was to address the regulators' concerns that we had in terms of performance monitoring. And one of the things that we do every month is when we meet with the regulator, we do go through all of the performance slides with them in depth, and they do review and they do ask questions and challenge us on our on what we are reporting. Internally, our service managers use the pack. They add commentary, which gives context, and they also identify where there are barriers to us making further improvements and what actions they're taking to address that. This also helps us in terms of when we're managing risk as well. We have, since we embarked on this journey in terms of performance management, we have also added 19 other risk areas, which, although aren't considered to be part of the big five, they are what's viewed as being a plus area. So there are other smaller areas in terms of safety, but actually have a big impact in terms of risk. So that would be areas such as emergency lighting, any of our powered gates that we have, CCTV, our door entry systems, they all get included in that reporting. So the performance reporting cycle, as I said, goes up through the boards, and in your pack, one of the things that I have included are the performance graphs that we have been using and that we will be using when we make our submission to the regulator to demonstrate our progress. So I know they're not probably not as easy to read on the eye because they're relatively small, but I think if you look at the graphs that are in the pack, you'll see that we have gone from quite low baselines now up to, in many areas, we are fully compliant, achieving 100%. In the areas where we don't quite meet 100% yet, there is narrative that sits behind all of that to explain the journey and the progress, and what our plan is to achieve 100% across all those key areas. Some of the issues that we've had to deal with in getting us to this position relate around contract management and procurement, and this was an area that we were very weak on, and it was quite a substantial contributing factor to the issues that led to us being issued with the regulatory notice. So we have worked consistently across the teams to ensure that we are procuring correctly, that we are maintaining an up-to-date contracts register, and that we are developing a procurement strategy that means we will have a pipeline for future work. Part of all of this and how we did this was to commission an independent review of our procurement and contract management process, and what that has done is it's given us a very clear guidance as to what we need to do for the future. So in 2025 we will commence on procuring in a different way to how we've been doing in the past. So we will reduce down from having numerous contracts in place to having fewer contracts that we're dealing with slightly bigger areas of work. So this This review is ongoing and it will be work in progress for quite some time. One of the areas that we are very keen to introduce are strong and robust service level agreements and KPIs to go into the contracts, and that will be something that all of our staff and managers will be holding the contractors accountable for as they move forward and manage the contracts into the future. Contracts will be awarded for longer durations of time. So instead of a 1 year contract or a 1+1, we will go for longer periods of time. That should give us more assurance of work because the marketplace is competitive at the moment. We'd like to be seeing some economies of scale, but the important thing in all of this is the quality of work. And that goes hand in hand with us being effective about both how we procure and then how we manage the procurement once we've got to that position. We do work closely with our corporate colleagues in the commercial hub to make this whole process as efficient as we can. The last area that we've been looking at is culture. So culture issues are often symptomatic of a service that lacks leadership and support, teamwork, and clear guidance and clarity about where that team needs to go to. These were all viewed to be a contributing factor to the position that we find ourselves in. Again, we have done a lot of work around this. We are much more self-aware and we've taken active steps to be able to address some of those issues that cause these historic issues to be in place and the poor performance that was evident. So now leadership and the focus on ensuring compliance is really strong. We are working with the new building safety team, and the managers are getting as much support as they need. We're very keen that they become self-aware and that we are really encouraging them to get out and network with other areas of the business that are strong, and indeed other organisations where there is strength around this area. We have undertaken staff surveys from the beginning of this with the team, and a recent staff survey with all of our housing staff showed that there are higher levels of satisfaction across all of the themes that we look at in the survey, and that include demands on individuals, staff being more in control of their own work, and about the relationships and support that they're getting from their managers. In terms of resident engagement, this is an area that we are starting to address more robustly. So we have reintroduced, as part of a wider resident engagement strategy and plan that's being delivered across housing, we have reintroduced the residents building safety panel, and we're reviewing all of the information that we provide to our residents. And what we are very keen to do is to make sure that through the work of both the building safety team and the wider assets team, that we are putting safety very much at the centre of the culture that we're delivering in our services to our residents. Our next steps then, we need to, and there is the desire to continue to strengthen our position across all of our compliance areas, and this will be very much still the focus of the Rebuilding the Housing Service programme. We need to continue to strengthen leadership and governance. We have a new strategic director in place, and from that we will look at the operational culture and again our performance. When the reports from the 2 reviews are available, we will be presenting these through the governance process. So they will go to the Rebuilding the Housing Service Executive Board, to cabinet members for safe, and to the cabinet member for safe and generally affordable homes, and to the leader of the council and other council members, to ensure that we have sign off before we present those to the regulator. We expected that to be in October or November, and the proposal will be to remove the regulatory notice. The governance structure will remain in place for the next 18 months to ensure that there is continued oversight at senior levels as we continue on this journey and deliver the full programme, achieving where we want to get to, which is delivering a service of excellence across all of the building safety areas. That's the report.
Great, thank you very much. So if I can start opening it up and see the questions from members, please. Or Councillor Ward, please.
So firstly, clearly there's been huge amounts of progress. Can you hear okay? Like in the middle.
I can, yes, thank you.
Clearly there's been a huge amount of progress since the self-referral, so I think we will be want to make clear our thanks for the work that's been done. The question I have relates to the maisonettes and so on, the 1 and 2 story council properties. Just wondered what because then we as councillors we go on estate inspections, but they don't happen for those 1 and 2 story properties. So I wonder what elements of the safety work happen for those and what don't. I mean, there's one specific I noticed. There's a graphic on the commercial electricity, but not domestic electricity. So, for instance, do they get electricity checked?
Yes. So if there is a communal area, they will there will be a fire risk assessment if that's appropriate. There will be, if there's a communal if there's a communal electric supply, it will there will be a communal electrical certificate. So the inspection will be undertaken on that once every 5 years. And when that inspection is undertaken, if there's any remedial works needed at the time, those are identified and then they are dealt with through part of our programme. Then in terms of the individual properties, it depends on whether, if there is a gas supply, they will have a gas certificate. So there will be a landlord's gas safety check done every year. And then once every 5 years, they will have an electrical testing to the individual property as well.
Thanks. Just follow up. I think I'm right in saying that there's I'm more frequent electrical. Actually, well, John, not a big expert on this. I think it's 5 years ago that would be for.
Yeah, the electrical safety inspection is very much down to the tester themselves. It's to a maximum of 5 years, but what you're tending to find across certainly the residential market that I deal with, they are very, very much a bit nervous at going for 5 years. You're seeing a lot of them at anything between 3 and 4 years. 4 years is the maximum that I've seen. But that's my experience, and obviously, Dawn, you may say you find something different on that.
Yeah, so what we do is we do them once every 5 years and also at every change of tenancy. So if a new tenant is coming in, we do, as part of the change of tenancy process, we do a new gas certificate and a new electrical certificate as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Marcy for helping you with that.
It's all right. You're going to sit on this, no problem.
Yes, indeed.
Shall I go next? Dawn, can I say thank you? Honestly, it's a fantastic report, and I suppose I'm quite lucky because I've dealt with Dawn on a number of issues, unfortunately, in our ward that have come up, and all that I've seen, and it's really quite interesting for me, having been an elected councillor for 15 months, 16 months now, I suppose I was really disappointed to see that Ealing had to self-regulate itself and support itself. But unfortunately, what I have seen is a huge improvement. And I can only say to the panel that the experience I've had since this report's come out, and just prior to it, to be fair, has been nothing but exemplary and extremely professional. It's quite clear we've addressed pretty much all the concerns that have come forward. There was also understand the problems that the council are under with regard to trying to get contractors out there. They are very few and far between, and it's really, really difficult. It is a very, very, very competitive market. One thing I think I just need to be absolutely clear, and I suppose again, I just look across a number of housing issues that we've got, is just, I can't emphasize how important the resident engagement is. And I think that's something really we should have an absolute priority. And I think from a councillor's point of view, I think we've lost the love of our tenants at the moment, and we need to bring that back on board. We need to be putting our arms around them, telling them that we will solve their problems. Look, they're not going to be solved tomorrow, maybe the day after. It will take some time, and there is no doubt about it that I think, you know, for you to put a sort of, you know, 18 months in it is brilliant. I mean, I think it may well be 3 to 4, maybe 5 years before we actually get them all back on board. I suppose the big key to all this is just how we're actually going to be able to do it. And I'm delighted that, you know, you've got a team now. I know you're going to bring a few more in, a few graduates, which is great. And I think that was very evident in the report that the team that we had here at the council wasn't big enough. It wasn't strong enough. And I don't think they knew enough about it. And I think there was a lot of passing the buck, for want of a better word. So I'm delighted the way that this has moved forward, but we're going to have to keep that momentum up. That's the thing, to keep it going. But I just want to make sure that resident engagement is absolutely, if not top, second from top, really, because I think as councillors, that will be really important for us, because at least we know that there are communications going on, because I think we've all got casework where I suppose at the end of the day, people are going, well, I've heard nothing from no one. And that's the disappointing comment, where we walk in and we hear, oh, I heard from someone at the council, thank you so much. Suddenly we're all pulling together in the right direction. So if we can definitely look at that, I'll be delighted to hear that.
So I'll just answer anything on that one.
No, I think you know, we hope to, the Building Safety Forum is the wider engagement piece, but actually on a day-to-day level, the staff and the building safety managers, so they have responsibility for our over 18-metre blocks, and the start of that resident engagement journey is starting at local level in those HRRB blocks. And the staff are engaging with residents and working with them to understand what we can do to make improvements, and to listen to what the residents are telling us. So that's very much, as you say, the start of the journey, and we just need to keep building and developing on that. But the Building Safety Forum is where we're looking to have more input from our wider resident base. So not just the blocks, the larger blocks, it's from across all of the stock. And you know, that will take time to mature, but certainly there is active work going on there, and we look to expand that as we can over time.
I'll just come back on that. Dawn, can I ask, the Building Safety Forum, who is part of that?
In terms of residents,
yeah,
that's open to all residents, and then it's supported by both resident engagement staff from the housing team and the building safety staff as well.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair? That might be one of our sort of projects or our programmes, to actually attend one of those meetings, so we can get a clearer picture to what.
Yes, certainly. I mean, that might be an idea. We can get that set up. That's still.
Thank you, Dawn.
Councillor Crawford, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rice. Yeah, goals, and I've got two. One which builds on what Councillor Martin was speaking about there. So obviously, I think we all agree that resident safety is vital, and that communication piece that you discussed just now is paramount. I would like to, and then in the next steps section that follows on from that in the report, Dawn, you mentioned it already about what happens when the 2 reviews come back and they're going to be presented to the various cabinet members, the leader of the council, other cabinet members. And I understand the processes to get us to a position where we can remove the regulatory notice, and that's the statutory process that you're following. But the initial element of the report was talking about a 3-year process to get us to excellence and compliance with the best possible standard. And the question I'd like to ask is, what's the role for councillors and what's the role for us as a scrutiny panel in terms of the ongoing oversight of this process? Because we're currently responding to a self-referral and a set of metrics and a process that has been put in place because we're not compliant. Although I recognise the work that has gone in, there are no metrics in this report apart from the ones that you very clearly specified to show how we're going to reach to remove the notice that framework, but to get to the level of excellence and to build in the reassurance for our residents. You know, what are the next steps beyond the next steps element? What's the ambition for you as someone who's leading on this work to take us further forward? And how can we scrutinise that going forward as local council?
So in terms of delivering a service of excellence, the ideal position we would like to be in is that all of our areas, we are fully compliant at all times. You know, that really is a position of strength to be in, and that we have that we're able to communicate that position to all of our residents, that if a resident wants to look on for the block that they live in or the property that they live in, that they can see very easily that information being available, so they can look at the most recent fire risk assessment and see if there's any recommendations from it, that they can check to see if they what the status of or when the last electrical survey was done or their last gas survey was done. So that's part of how we keep our residents informed. In terms of that as well, we want to utilise more our housing news. So one of the things that we do is we promote building safety in every single edition of Housing News, and we are running some strong comms around that at the moment. So what we try to do is to try to refresh older articles so that it's always being drip fed in, so that if people have forgotten about some things that are very important, that we do flag that, and then we trying to keep, you know, constantly looking to see what's coming down the horizon. So if there are issues that we see that other landlords or other organisations are picking up on, we're trying to address that as well, so that we can start to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think that's very much where we would like the service to be. And in terms of scrutiny from senior managers and from members, I think there's very much an appetite to keep all of these channels open, so that, you know, we are held accountable for all of our performance, and that you know, we are kept very honest about where we are, so that we don't find ourselves in a position that we did back in the early parts of 2022, where we couldn't give the clarity that was needed.
If I could just follow up, two of the big areas of casework for me as an acting councillor at the moment over the summer have been issues with the Decent Homes programme, and getting us to a place where all the people who've been identified as being in need of getting those repairs done, if you like, and getting and moving through that. So some of the communications has been lacking because we're a little bit behind. The difficulty is in establishing what communications have gone out and how regularly we can go back And I think that relates to some of the things you were talking about with different contractors and how easy it is to enter all of those blocks. And then the other one is around disability facilities grants for people who are in need of those, and the delays. I know that's not strictly related to what we're speaking about, but it's broadly the confidence of our communities in getting those repairs, as well as the wider context of building safety. So I think we're all cognizant of the need to be right on top of building safety, given what's happened in the and is still happening in the building community at the moment. You know, implementing the recommendations potentially of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, and then the other things that follow on from that in terms of compliance. I just wonder if there's a piece of work or in reviewing some of those communications that are going out, whether that's something that the not necessarily the resident building safety panel, but the resident engagement team and the work that we're doing corporately as a council. I wonder if there's a way in which we can have an idea of what the model communications are, what is being sent out to residents, how regularly are we in contact with those residents who are reporting problems, and what are our aspirations going forward over the longer term, because our stress, Chair, and still what we're talking about in this report is to be getting up to the place where we can remove that notice and be confident that we're meeting the compliance. But as Dawn has already expressed, there's an ambition and aspiration to go much further beyond that and reach excellence, and that's getting the confidence of our community back behind us. So I wonder if there's a scheme of work there that we can look at over a longer term to assist with what Dawn and her team are trying to do.
So my wider team, we are just about to embark on a 5-year rolling stock condition survey. So that will, and we're going to start with, we're going to prioritise our communal areas and blocks and our higher risk buildings to begin with, and then we will go on to the individual properties. And once we start to gather all of that information together, that will help inform us about the condition of our assets and where we need to now in the future focus our expenditure, and where our budgets where we need to be able to maximise our budgets to make sure that our homes are in conditions that we would want our residents to be living in. So that is coming. In terms of communications, we will be communicating with residents to tell them that the stock condition survey is going to be undertaken and that it is a 5-year programme, and we'll explain as part of that what the reasons behind it are and then what the outputs would be. So that will shape the programmes of the future. So it'll help us with a 30-year financial plan and then a 5-year delivery plan after that sits alongside that.
Thank you. So,
just one more thought of seeing as it's topical at the moment. Are we confident that there isn't any reinforced autoclave aerated concrete in the housing stock?
Yes, we don't believe we have any at the moment. So our records at the moment tell us that there isn't any. We did have we have had stock condition surveys in the past, and it hasn't been identified in those, but it is one of the things that this stock condition survey will look at as we move forward.
That's thank you. That's good to know. I think so. It's kind of the questions I have probably follow on from that graph. I mean, one thing I will say, I'm really pleased to read in the report that you want to look at lifts as being something that you consider, because I know that it's been a really huge issue in some of the blocks that I look after as a councillor, that lifts, when the lifts don't work, it just sounds like a kind of a bit of an inconvenience, but actually could create a lot of self-safety issues. What happens if you've got a buggy to take up a number of stairs and you can't do that? I mean, it can create safety issues. So thank you very much for looking at that. And it's actually, it's interesting to be reading about, you talking about the loss of data through the previous systems that were in place, and just and talking about the single version of the truth, and just looking at the idea of communication as well. We have there been kind of issues just with communication that we're working on, and that's actually helping us to improve. And what that makes me think about as well is that what kind of lessons can we bring forward, when not just when it comes to repairing existing properties, but when it comes to the new builds and building new properties. As Councillor Broad brings up, there's a lot that's in the news at the moment. We're talking about schools and hospitals being in a very unpleasant state at the moment, a frightening state of affairs, and also talking about Grenfell and the cladding scandal. I myself, I live in a block which is below 18 metres. And so I've been living under threat of potentially having some huge bill in order to repair my block and to make it safe. Fortunately, we've now got to a situation where that's being resolved. But it is just quite frightening to think that where I am is actually quite new. There are councils that I know at the moment with the Labour group who gave planning permission for my building to be built in the first place. And so that's how kind of scary it is that there are problems with a lot of existing buildings that we have. So what kind of lessons can we learn, and what can we communicate from what we're learning from our process of you looking at the stock and what's going on, and what can we do when it comes to building out new buildings, and how we can build those in a far better way.
So recent changes in regulations. You may well have heard of what is called the golden thread, and that starts in terms of development at the very beginning, and then works its way through right through till the property is being lived in. And where we come in now is we're part of that process from the beginning, so we're working much more closely with our colleagues in regen and in development, so that whenever properties are being in the conceptual ideas, that we're feeding into what works well at the moment, what we think would work well in the future, and we're beginning to see some of the benefits of that now in the newer properties that are coming online, where we've been able to influence that. And when I talked about our procurement for the future, all of that builds in, and it all helps with when I talk about economies of scale. So if we're able to influence from the beginning, so that we're not putting in a different type of, say, door entry system that then requires maybe 3 or 4 different contractors to be able to work on those. If we're able to have one door entry, it's much more economical, and we get a better service, and we can manage that much better. So that's what we're trying to do, and we'll keep working very closely with our colleagues in the other areas to try to achieve that.
That's great, thank you. And also, when it comes to our contracts, we talked about having contracts on longer durations. I mean, that does sound like a very kind of sound and stable idea. And also there can be drawbacks, that if we find that a contractor isn't doing as well as they could do, how easy it is for us to monitor the work of contractors and ensure that they meet standards that we demand.
Yeah, so again, that's very much down to us ensuring that we have robust contract management, and that we're very clear from the time that we go out to tender about what our expectations are, and that from commencement of and mobilisation of a contract right through to ongoing progress, that we are meeting regularly, that we review their performance, and that the contract allows us to manage in that way. So we've recently mobilised a new repairs contractor, and that's what we're doing there as well. So we're regularly in contact, we speak, we review, and if there are issues, they're dealt with as quickly as possible, rather than letting them drag out and then just become compounded by other issues.
Oh, thanks very much. So I think that might be the end of the questions on there. So you've actually given us a lot of reassurance, and I hope that our residents can feel that reassurance as well. And thank you for your time, Dawn, and wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Okay, so in that case, we can move on to our next report. We've got the annual parking report. I know this normally goes to OSC, but now because we cover the transport side here in this committee, we're looking at it here this time. So we're very pleased to welcome, we've got Gina Cole, the Assistant Director of Parking Services, and Mark McIntosh, the Commercial Asset Manager, speak to us about our parking situation. So please do. Yeah, let us know what's going on.
Good evening, everyone, and Chair. So the report this year, as you know, it contains a lot of financial and statistical information. And in case you weren't aware, Chair, this report has to be published by in accordance with the Traffic Management Act 2004, and it has to be published by the end of September. It's almost like a statutory requirement that the 33 London boroughs should publish their parking annual report. So I'm just going to take you through the report that I know that you've probably all read. So firstly, we will look at the CPZ map that we produced, and this the last financial year there were 3 CPZs introduced. One was in Ealing, one was in Norfolk, one in Southall. That takes us to a total of 56 CPZs within our borough now. There's a table that explains the hours of the zones. Mainly, as you will all know, the CPZs within Ealing, they're either all-day zones or 2-hour zones. We're very much trying to push towards all-day zones, but it depends on the residents' requirement. The prices between the two now, the gap is really small. Residents used to choose the 2-hour zone mainly because it was a cheaper permit, plus it stopped commuter parking within the location. But the price difference is very narrow now. So it's easier for us to enforce all-day zones than it is 2-hourly zones. Then I'll just take you on to the school street. So the target for school streets between now and 2026, I believe, should be 50 school streets. We're actually up to 24. The team are working very closely with the schools to try and get as many school streets in the borough as possible, but they do like to have the schools accredited and for the schools to engage and be part of it, and to encourage the parents not to drive or to encourage them to walk or take alternative travel. They are quite successful. They do fund themselves. The enforcement of the school streets funds the introduction of them, so they're self-funded. Then we've also got electric charging points within the borough. We've now there's charging points, a total of 504 in the borough now. The target for the council plan is 751, so I think we're very much on track to meet that target. And there's different, as you know, there's different types of charging points. There's a normal charging point, there's a rapid, there's a fast speed. The rapid ones, I think they charge within up to 1 hour, you can charge your vehicle. And at the moment, we've got 24 of them in the borough. The normal charging that takes up to approximately 9 hours, Mark, is 354. And then the 1 to 4 hours, which is the fast charging, is 373. And then we've got car clubs. At the moment, there's 2 different types of car clubs that we've got. So we've got a back to base car park, and we've got also a floating car club. So a back to base means where if you were to hire a car from a car club, that wherever you pick it up, you would then have to take it back to where you picked it up from, so back to base. We've now introduced a floating car club, which means you can pick the car up from a location and drop it off at any location. I'm not 100% if that still has to be within the borough, does it, Mark? It has to. So you can drop it off anywhere within the borough, but it doesn't. Very natural.
No, I know it's complex. You can drop in a whole load of different boroughs.
That's what I.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So yes, thank you, councillor. So what that means is now you can get the car from any location and drop it off, like councillor Ball said, at any other location, which is outside the borough as well. So the car clubs are running really well at the moment. There are last year there were 47,192 completed trips using the car club. Then if I just take you on to a little bit of statistical reporting. So that table just shows the number of PCNs that were issued in the year from the year 2021, 21, 22 and 22, 23. And the total amount of PCNs issued for last year was 223,562. That was a slight reduction on previous years, but then you may recall that in previous years we had LTNs which generated a lot of penalty charge notices, and they were removed in 21 July, August and 21. So it has PCN issuance dropped slightly because of that reason. But then unfortunately we do receive complaints in parking.
No, really.
And yeah, so the complaints table, you will see an increase in complaints received in the last financial year. But we believe it's not because we're getting more complaints, it's because people are able to complain a lot easier. There's a new system that's been introduced called the CRM. So it's easier for people to communicate with us now. So they use that process to complain about parking. So we then it gives up, and also the reason we've got more stats now at a higher level is that we've got improved data as well. So we're able to record a lot better concerning complaints. But the CRM, it records every complaint that comes in. So it's and it's a lot easier for the public to use. And then we've got cashless parking. So when we previously had approximately Mark is the expert in the cashless parking. But previously we had 206 paying display machines within the borough. Mark and his team was targeted to reduce them substantially. They are now down to 125. Mark is going to reduce them again by another 65, leaving about 60 in the borough. But I need to be very clear, he doesn't just go and just take the machines out of the ground. What he will do, he will bag them up and then get feedback. He waits, he bags them up for a while and then waits for feedback and complaints before he actually removes them out of the ground. And the complaints have been minimal, which is why Mark has been able to continue with that program that he was targeted with. And also for us, cashless parking is a better way of recording the use of our parking bays, plus the fact we're able to offer, we can charge more for more polluting vehicles using the cashless parking, or we can reduce the charge for a less polluting vehicle, whereas the cash machines, they're not sophisticated enough to do that. So if you went to a cash machine, you would just pay one price anyway. Whereas if you're able to use the cashless parking, depending on your vehicle and how much it pollutes, you could be charged higher or you could be charged substantially less. I'll take you on to some financial information. I mean, I'll leave questions to the end, Chair. So this year, the total income last financial year, the total income that parking received was 206 million. Sorry, I do apologise. 26 million. Sorry, my glasses. Yeah, it was 26 million. And we had an expenditure budget of 19 million. The income.
That was the expenditure.
So forgive me.
7.
I do forgive me, check panel. So the income was 26 million and the expenditure was 7 million with a surplus, giving us a surplus of 19 million. Now, the details of how we get the income via the different contributions within the table, I can take any questions, I can take that. But with the from our parking account, we, as you all know, the council is obligated to contribute a certain amount of money to concessionary fares. I do believe the total amount for the council is approximately 15 million, and parking services contribute real substantial amount towards that. In 2021, it was 14 million, 21, 22, 13 million, and last financial year, it was 9 million. And we then also had infrastructure investment where we invest in highways improvements, their lighting, highways lighting. As you know, there was a lot of publicity and female safety, so we've invested a lot of money into the street lighting, highways maintenance, and investment in the infrastructure within the borough. Just touching back on this concessionary fares as well, that in the Ealing alone, there's 42,714 residents who have who benefit from the concessionary fares. I think they call it an Oyster card. Freedom Pass. Yeah, and so that means they can travel within London free of charge. And then also there's a taxi pass as well. And within Ealing, there's 7,048 residents that can benefit from free taxi services, and parking services contribute to that. That is the bulk of the report. There are appendices that show the prices of our products and the different types of products that we have and the different types of permits. So I'm going to stop there, Mark. Unless you've got anything to add, we can open up to questions.
I think questions would be fine. Cool. Okay, we'll agree. Okay, so any questions there, please?
So first of all, is a thank you to the team, Sabina, and all of the officers and colleagues for how promptly they respond to. I wouldn't call them complaints, but some of I've taken on an expanded board, as you all know, and many residents are very familiar with how they can get in contact, not only with their councillors, but also particularly with parking services.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
And just this evening, I responded in respect of a CBC review around Common and one of Gina's other hats that she wears is helping us with HS2, which I wonder if the environmental impact of HS2 might be something that we may look at towards the end of this panel. I'll float that with you another time outside of this meeting, Chair. But given how important getting that right is, I think it's important to place on record that we've had a much accelerated review process, and that's down to the dedication of the officer team and very specific engagement with local residents, which I know residents of Wales very much appreciate. Gina, you could pass that on.
I would do. Thank you, Councillor.
And then my only other question, and I hesitate to bring this up, given that Gina has just been extolling the virtues of cashless visitor card, is that I have had some concerns from residents who are elderly, vulnerable, or disabled in respect of they need to use cash because they can't always, they're unable, unless they have a carer with them, they're unable to use some of the forms, or it's more difficult for them to use non-cashless, cashless means of payment. And I know that we try and facilitate that as best as we can. And I know the report is very specific about what Mark and his team do in respect of the amount of time we wait to see how it changed from a cash-driven location to a cashless donation. But I'm sort of concerned about the broader consequences over a passage of time, because the report is very clear, and it needs to be, that we are expecting nationally the cash element to be phased out. But I know that the government, Mr. Gove in particular, has indeed written to this authority about needing to keep cash options open. And I just wanted to delve into that a little bit more, because clearly there's an equality impact assessment and process that we need to abide by if we want to make sure we're more proficient in charging the vehicles in the way that Gina has outlined in her comment, but also making sure that we're providing the service and access to need to park for people who need that extra assurance that they are going to be able to park in a number of locations. And they can't always predict where they're going to go as well. It's a really difficult one to wrestle with, Chair, but I just appreciate maybe some indulgence in terms of laying out a position on what local councillors can do where we have those. I'm speaking of the particular locations, you know, some of our popular locations like Eden Common or you know, around the borough where we're trying to attract people to come to.
Yeah.
And it might be a day out. If we remove those options, we may be removing the ability of people to travel as easily as they might come through.
Thanks, Councillor. I think there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind just listening to those concerns, and they are concerns that we considered when we initially undertook to approach Cabinet and recommend the reduction in the number of machines that we have. First of all, I think it's worth mentioning that blue badge holders continue to park for free, not just in our sort of car parks, not just in pay and display bays, but even in permit bays across the borough. So, you know, I don't sort of, you know, I know that there's many older residents who sort of don't have blue badges, but those that do can sort of benefit from that. They don't need to concern themselves with the question of payment. I think as well, we've really tried to sort of find a parking solution that makes it very easy for those people who are expected to pay to sort of move from a cash option to a phone option. We're not requiring anyone to download an app or use an app. You know, they can just use a telephone, they can just make a call and sort of make payment that way. And our staff and the staff of our provider are always sort of on hand to sort of provide assistance to them. The provider pay by phone that we use as a 24-hour helpline. Those staff, I've called them up myself just to sort of test their sort of ability to test their communication skills, and they're really very good. They're very patient. They talk people through what's needed in order to register, in order to make a transaction. So we're making it as easy as possible for people to sort of move over, and not requiring them to sort of fully adopt new technologies in a way that maybe some other boroughs are. We've also tried to keep a cash option open in some locations. We're not taking out all of the machines. In fact, we're taking them out quite slowly, if I'm honest. Being very sort of cautious, looking at the data before we take a machine out the ground. You know, we'll turn it off. We'll wait to see if we get comments back from members of the public. We look at the usage of that machine and see if the usage suddenly goes through the floor. And if it does, that's an indicator, even if we haven't had a complaint, that people are being turned off that area in a way that we don't want. But thus far, the machines that we have taken out, which admittedly is the low-hanging fruit and the machines we thought of most likely to be expendable, but that hasn't yielded any machines so far where we felt that it was necessary to switch the machine back on. But we're going to keep an open mind.
It's really useful, Kate.
Thank you. Yeah, that was something I was going to ask about, really, what's going on with the cashless society that we're moving towards. Because it doesn't occur to me how easily you can be excluded, because I recently had to stop my debit card So I went to a concert, but then couldn't actually buy a drink at the bar because they only accepted cards, and so I can understand how something could be. I know, yeah. Well, someone's and something by itself, it's that. So yeah, that's.
Just to add as well, I think Mark does he carries out a lot of statistical information just to make sure that the pay by phone, the cashless option is increasing. It's not as though, oh, we're removing machines and it's not increasing. So it's an indication that people are confident and using the cashless option. Because how much is it 80 something now, Mark?
It's about 89% of people are using the pay by phone system, and that's, if I'm being honest with you, that's not 100% indicative of what people want to do, because we've got some locations in the borough where cash isn't an option. But even in the areas where we have the machine and the phone option side by side, we're seeing usage in the machines drop and usage of the phone increase.
Any other questions? Oh,
What,
okay,
Jamie?
that's not a
Jamie.
yeah.
Yeah, if I can ask two brief ones and then one a bit more something else, sorry. So first one, sort of declaring interest, but arguing against my own interest. I noticed in the table, the price for suspensions for filming is £20, whereas for general use it's £30. Just wondered the thinking of that, because location manager will kill me about that. To be honest, the cost is over more than the overall cost of having a film unit. I think we'll get away with charging £30.
Councillor Paul, I'm with you 150%, because it's something that I've argued ever since I've come to Ealing Council and realised the reduction that the film office pay. But it's always come up against a barrier from various different areas that we couldn't increase the charge, or it wouldn't be reasonable to increase the charge for the film office. But I agree with you, councillor. You've got elderly people moving homes who have to pay that charge, and yet the film office is making money from what they're doing, and they're still paying a lower charge. I mean, Mark, I don't know if since you've been working with because it's not really Mark's area, but working with the film office, we've tried so hard to increase that price. And
we do, but I think it's perhaps also worth mentioning that we do think it's a good thing that the film industry wants to film in Ealing. I think it promotes the borough very, very well. And if I've spoken to the film office on numerous occasions about our thoughts regarding varying the fees that are asked for, and I take Gina's point of view, but at the same time, it's been quite a difficult time for the film industry, and if we can continue to allow Ealing to be a place where these companies can afford to film and represent our borough and sort of showcase the beauty and the sort of like I don't know, the attractiveness of Ealing, and I think that would be a good thing.
Well, I won't come up on that because I'm asking you first. On the very first thing about new CPZs, there was mention of encouraging all-day ones because they're easy to enforce. A lot of CPZs really the issue is very much commuter parking, and so it's not really necessary to have all day, and it's not just a cost, it's more convenient for residents to be able to have tradespeople and friends visiting and so on. So I just wondered if the times were staggered so that your enforcement officers could go around from one to another, wouldn't it be possible, as long as they're not, I can understand the problem if you've got all the zones in the same 2 hours, but you just had a different chunk of time, and so that they just walk from one to another. It kind of seems not impossible problems work out a pattern so that they're more impossible.
no, and councillor, going forward, it will be a lot easier, because as you've probably seen within the borough, there's ANPR vehicles, and the ANPR vehicles can drive down the road and find out very quickly if a car is in contravention if it doesn't have a permit. So the use of the vehicles and motorbikes, mopeds does make enforcement of the shorter CPZs a lot easier. It's just that the numbers of CEOs that we have at the moment, it can't cover, like it could visit the CPZ within the morning, but then to cover the all day zones as well, to get back in the afternoon, it doesn't, it's sometimes, it takes a lot of time, but we, as you probably all know, the enforcement contract is coming in-house and will be going to Greener Ealing as of the 1st of April next year, and we're hoping to increase the number of CEOs, especially down in the Southall area, and have more innovative vehicles that can capture a lot easier for us. So going back to your point, Councillor, sorry, I've gone off on one there, but it at the moment it is difficult for us to enforce, but not difficult, it just takes a lot longer to do so, and it's not always feasible to go back to the same. You go into one CPZ in the morning, but as you can see, there's 56 of them, and the number of resource that we have, it's difficult for them to go back to that area in the afternoon. But hopefully going forward, and with the hope that we can increase the number of CEOs and the type of enforcement that we do, that it won't be too much of an issue for us.
Okay, thanks, that's very helpful. And finally, very, very supportive of more electric charging bays on street for vehicles, electric vehicles, but the issue that's raised by a lot of residents is how expensive some of them are. So there's the variability between the different providers. Some of them are hugely more expensive than others, and if there are no cheaper ones nearby, then I think some people have worked out it's only marginally cheaper than putting a petrol car on the ones that are trying to do is track tariffs. And also there's you have to kind of fill in quite a lot of information to register for each system, and the several different systems around the borough. So I wondered what can be done about that going forward. Presumably the ones that are there are on long-term contracts with the suppliers, but in terms of new ones, is anything being done to look at having cheaper, cheaper ones rather than more expensive ones for future ones going in? Because I mean, what I see is that the more expensive ones are underused because people are trying to actually find something cheaper.
Councillor, can I take that one away and come back to you with that? Because the implementation of the charging points is actually done with our transport colleagues, so I can go away and speak to them with regard to that and come back to you with a more accurate answer, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. It's an issue that's been raised by that.
Okay, yes, that's definitely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mark, well, firstly, thank you again for a great report, and also for your valuable contribution to the High Street Task Force, which is invaluable, to be honest. However, I do have a little bit of a concern over cashless machines, and it would be good if we could be kept up to date as a task force just on what's happening in relation to the machines coming out. I mean, just with my local plan engagement across our 7 towns, particularly Greenford, is one of the areas, and I know that businesses are hugely concerned about that, the car park at the rear of Tesco's, yeah, and that the cashless society sort of thing basically being the way forward. I think it is important that those lines of communication are certainly kept open, certainly with me being as the chair, and certainly across our businesses. So I think a little bit more engagement there would certainly be useful. To get down to the the real sort of bones of this, how many CEOs do we currently have at the moment?
I believe there's 50. But with that, council, that includes, I believe, team leaders and team managers. So team managers and team leaders aren't, as much as we want them to be, they're not always out in the street.
I know that we've had a number of emails of regarding schoolscapes, whatever we want to call it this week, but also just generally, just in relation to parking. And I know Southall is one of the big areas, and I know it's only one of our 7 towns, but I'm just trying to think, is this an opportunity by bringing it back in-house, how we can actually rethink our strategy in relation to how we actually send out our CEOs? And what I'm sort of thinking sort of generally, and I suppose it's more of taking it back a bit. And I always sort of look, and again, particularly when we're looking at doing stuff on the high street, where there were 2 people that always, as we were growing up, that you'd always know on a high street. One was the local Bobby, and the other one was always the postman, and they were always the people who knew what was happening on your high street. Now, I know we've moved forward, and it's great that we've got this the cameras and in the vehicles as such. But what I'm trying to sort of get to here is there a way that we can actually look, potentially we've got new CEO or possibly some extra CEOs coming in, that we actually have dedicated enforcement officers over the course of the day for each town, so that we know where they're going to be. Because I understand the frustrations, and I'll be honest, I was out on Bridge Road 10 days ago, and it was incredible, just not so much the grief that I actually saw of drivers who quite clearly parked illegally and were quite clearly getting tickets. And I understand the abuse that the civil enforcement officers get, and the fact that a week before one of them had been assaulted by someone, which is absolutely unacceptable. But it's just how we can look at our strategy so that we can try and look and cater for our 7 towns. And, you know, Southall is a little bit unique. Let's be honest, it does run for 18, 19 hours a day, let's be fair. But, you know, the emails, the social media, all the sort of stuff that we're receiving as councillors, or certainly the Southall councillors, it's just how we can try and deal with that. And is this a great opportunity for us now to just look at our whole parking strategy again, that we can use the officers in a slightly more productive way, rather than having them chasing around the borough. Another thing that it comes up a lot is bay blocking, disabled blue badge bay blocking, and how we can sort of look at that a little bit. I mean, I understand territorially, if you've got a parking disabled bay outside your own property, oh, that's my bay. And I think I've done, I've put a question in. I think we've only got one that's actually a dedicated bay across the whole of the borough. And it's just how we can get that information out to these people, that it's not just your bay. You know, high streets again are a very, very valuable, or certainly disabled bays are very valuable. And I tend to find that, you know, we have people who will park there for a long time, probably exceeding the time limit. And the other thing that seems to come up is parking on double yellow lines with a blue badge, which I believe is acceptable,
Yes.
under the highways. But is there something there that, you know, is there an education that we need to do for some of these blue badge drivers, that, you know, parking 20 yards away or 40 yards away from an island where a bus has got to go through, a double-decker bus, is just absolute, but I'm entitled to do so. So is there something we can do here to try and re-educate people who've got blue badges that actually that's not going to help anybody?
It's also, forgive me for interrupting, it's also a disadvantage to disabled people who can't drive and don't have people able to drive them, because they might well be on that bus, it's blocked in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we want to, I think we're all clear, we want to keep traffic moving, and it's just what we can do as a local authority and as a scrutiny panel to try and re-educate people who are quite clearly, well, they're not abusing the blue badge because they're entitled to do so. So is there anything we can do to try and change that? And I suppose my sort of, it's not in the report, but I will throw it out there. I hope and believe that there's nothing coming on our stop and shop bays for high streets moving forward. Because I do think that that is something that is hugely beneficial for every single one of our high streets and our businesses across the borough. So I hope that's not going to be a left field somewhere coming over the next year. We're all still trying to recover from the pandemic, and parking is extremely important. I'm sure we'll be met with resistance, but no, again, just thank you. Thanks for your valuable contributions on everything you do. But I just think there are certain things, and we've got a great chance now to basically reinvent our parking services department with bringing it back in-house next year.
Thank you, councillor, and we do have frequent meetings with Green Ealing, and I think they probably share a lot of your views, but I will most certainly take back your comments and see what we can do. And with regards to the blue badges, I mean, we meet with London councils quite frequently as well, and we don't want to take away the parking from them, you know, that they're able, but I agree with you that when I first come to parking, I was quite shocked that you could have a blue badge and park on double yellow line for up to 3 hours, and I found, oh my goodness, double yellow lines are usually in dangerous areas. So I think it's something we need to take away and speak, not just for Ealing, but speak to London councils, but we most certainly speak to our colleague at Green at Ealing to make sure that we improve enforcement in areas, particularly within Southport. They are aware, councillor, of the issues that we have down there, and they're really keen to work with us to resolve them.
I suppose just want to come back on one thing. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Obviously, the bane of our life, bikes, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and so on.
Yes.
Again, part of
Mhm.
moving forward. And I know we've trialled it. I mean, I've got to be honest, it works in Pittshanger Lane, our bike bay, and everybody observes it. But we do have a problem in Ealing Broadway, which we are all very much aware, and it's one of the topics of conversation that are sort of various meetings at the task force. But it is something, again, I think we've got to look at very carefully. The safety of members of the public across our borough are just, it's paramount, and it's what we can do. And I know we're all having various conversations with various companies. Some will open the door, some won't for us. But again, if there's anything we can do to help us at task force or as a scrutiny panel, please don't be afraid to let us know. But I do think we need to look at how we can embrace it, because it's not going away following the pandemic. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Please, councillor Jessel.
Firstly, I'd just like to say a brilliant report. Thank you. It's very informative. I think it's got everything that we want to, got questions, you can just, look and check on the report. The other thing I'd like to just raise is, I'd like to say a big thank you to you and your team, Gina. That's the enforcement team who've been coming out and basically ticketing people that have been parking actually on pavement in Southport. Being a councillor in Southport West, I mean, we get a lot of those, complaints, and believe me, I've seen people fighting with each other because I got there first, and nearly hitting each other's cars and stuff like that. But that day, I've seen the enforcement officers out at the weekend as well when I've been out. So I was like so happy and pleased. I did take a picture of them as well. But
they're all drunk.
I mean, they were just brilliant. I mean, I know that it's not an easy job, because I know and I'm fully aware of the abuse and all that other stuff that goes on, and it's not very nice. It's not even nice to experience it, and I won't go into the things that have happened to them, but I just want to say that when they are there together, it does show a good sort of like a prominent show that, you know what, can't get away with it, and we need to deal with it. And I think when they're parking there, they don't get the actually it's people from Amsterdam that come in, to all those shops and plus the in the evening there restaurants are open and there are lines everywhere and people just want to park and they'll park anywhere. They've even come onto the Lancaster estate and parked outside people's drives. They parked in the drives. It's just, you know, stuff that goes on. It's just absolutely crazy. You wouldn't even think that they would even think like that, but they do because they're so desperate for the parking. And some of them don't even know that Herbert Road offers that parking. So it's just because it's in this like bang middle of the hot point of that area where the more famous and regular restaurants are. So they just everybody ends up there. But you know, just want to say a big thank you for that, and I really hope that that can be sort of like reinforced and continued, because when they see that presence, it does make them think. And a couple of them, when they saw the guys there, they did say, "Oh, is there anywhere we can park?" Just before they were going to get a ticket, is there anywhere else we can park, kind of thing. So, I mean, even if it might be just a bit of a suggestion, but you know, there's more than 2 officers that go out, maybe 3 together, you know, because safety numbers for them. And plus, it just shows a prominent sort of like, you know, presence that you can't get away with it now because evening council is serious. And not only that, it's health and safety for, you know, people crossing the roads and, you know, they've got children and prams and stuff. So I just want to say, you know, thank you so much. And please just, you know, if you can make sure that it just is reinforced and they're a regular sort of like feature there, you know, patrolling, even if, I mean, even patrolling gives that a really good message. You know, knowing that they're there, but, you know, it's a current approach.
Okay, thank you, councillor.
No, thank you very much. Just one last thing is, you know, I know recently there, a couple of months back was a huge problem with the blue badge theft going on. So I'm just wondering, has all that calmed down? Because there were a lot of complaints coming in that people didn't have badges and didn't know where to park then and how to get in touch with the council and who to speak to, and they didn't have a badge. So it's like it was a major mayhem at that time.
Councillor, we do have a company. Well, we used to have somebody that worked for parking services, but we work very closely with the blue badge fraud team, and they're out all the time and they're always prosecuting. The prosecution parking is very successful. We do, a lot of people don't know, but we actually, is it sell or is it free? Sell a permit. We have a permit for blue badge holders so that they don't have to put their blue badge in the car.
Yeah, it's a councillor who inspired idea from many years ago.
I don't want to say we charge or if we don't charge, I need to double check. I'm so sorry, I should know that, but there is a permit that you can get.
Judith, why don't you come back to us with that? Because I have to say that is something that I think as a council, it is something that we have discussed on many across a number of our towns on just how we try and get away with the blue badge because there just has been so many steps.
No, well, so I'm really surprised that we're not right with because this has been in operation for a long time. And I think the reason, if there is now a nominal charge, and it is would only be a nominal charge, it's because the scheme was taking well many more blue badge holders than there were previously. But I mean, this dates back, I'm going to say this is my first term of being a councillor. Mark's not in the initial term. No, let's hear from you. But it dates back to about 2012, 2011, 2012, something like that, where particularly in Acton, we're experiencing a lot of thefts from vehicles, or even theft of the person who was then taking their blue badge out of their car at night, and people were, and it's a really useful thing for disabled people and their carers not to have to have, you know, keep the. So I'm surprised, and perhaps one of the making a recommendation at this point, but perhaps we could promote this. In the High Streets Task Force, we're going in towards town forums in the near future. We'll have the residents engagement team that we were speaking about in relation to the previous item. this is something that could be promoted through the councils, just to say to people that. And it could go along with the previous piece of work that Councillor Martin and colleagues were speaking about you can have a blue badge. It comes with certain rights, but there are also responsibilities about how you employ that blue badge and how you use it responsibly. And I was taken by the conversation we've had just previously when I finished, no need to come in again, on the ability that we have with Jill to reshape the way we do transport and even environment. Something Councillor Martin and our other colleagues spoke about levels of traffic, issues in respect of how civil enforcement officers use the pressure they are put under. You know, we still have very strong net zero and climate change targets within this borough, and I think there's cross-party support for trying to reach those goals. But it's going to require a lot of the residents are going to have to come with us, and we know that there are blunt implements that we can use, and they haven't always been successful. But I think one of the recommendations that we should look at, are there some things some themes around scoping, how that reshaping works? Is there a way we can get ahead of a serious piece of work between our team or the various portfolio holders through the cabinet that are going to look at this with some worked examples in places like Southall, where my two colleagues have outlined real areas where actually, if we were looking at the most the hotspots, if you like, then all of our civil enforcement officers would have been in Southall and they'd been nowhere else. But can we look at sort of how we task, what ability the new legislation gives us? So there's possibility to increase charging for idling, things like that. We talked about more polluting vehicles, and we'll get into some of the issues that we've had with that across London. But there's a way in which, if we use the Transport and Environment Committee and the expertise of London Council and the West London Alliance, and we look at effective approach, then there are ways in which we can really redesign this thing. Given that we have lots of local residents associations, with borrowers, businesses, they're all campaign groups. If we get people around the table for a bit of imaginative about, you can have some pilot areas for certain things, then reduces the need for civil enforcement officers to be at the forefront. Yes. And it empowers local communities to say, yeah, okay, we've got, and I'll say, the best example of this is what Gina and her colleagues have done and stepped up on in various parts of mine, in terms of enforcing and looking at innovative ways of enforcing, and actually saying to the residents, look, you've got to tell us where the problem is. Yes. And then we'll adjust it in that way. But it's kind of a plea to say, actually, we can look at as a panel, where it is we think the key, some work outside of the meeting, maybe, where it is what are the key things for the next, I'm not saying it's to be concluded by the end of this period, but taking a holistic approach, over the next 2 or 3 years, by the next council election, what are the areas that we need to look at, what are the innovative ways?
Yeah, and certainly the good things of this meeting is it's recorded. I can listen back to that after it's been a good recommendation of the 6 yeah, and I mean, I just do have a couple of questions myself. I can just ask. One problem that's has been going on in my ward, especially, actually just outside of my ward, it's affecting my ward, is unlicensed music events. So we've had things going on at the North Island Fields where people just turn up, stay all night, and they've just been playing loud music and causing huge issues for residents. And one thing that they're often trying to recommend to me, the residents, is trying to tighten up what's going on in terms of parking at our parks. So I don't know if that's one thing that we could perhaps explore at some stage, because some of the people who were speaking to you about what's going on in terms of getting the parks locked up to prevent these events from going on and preventing people from coming in. So I think that's maybe a common point to think about. And it's also just actually interesting going through some of the figures here on the statistical reporting, for example. I mean, I can't read them fully, it's night, I must admit, but looking at the kind of figures for PCNs that are issued over those 3 years, but looking at the number of challenges that are made, it looks like that proportionally, you'd be less likely to be seeing a challenge made this year. And I was wondering really why is it that people are less likely to be making challenges of what's going on there, because that's quite an interesting story still. And there's also just another thing really, looking at penalty charge notices on Appendix 4. Going through there, you've got 3 years as well with statistics, but there's such disparity in terms of how many are issued in a particular year. I've got my hearing, I think it's the right part. In part of the parking space marked by a yellow line where waiting is prohibited. It seems that this year you've got over 1,000 of them, when maybe in previous years you only had 1 or 2. And so I was actually interested as to why there's such huge disparity in the facts of parking notices that are going out there. Is there any kind of good reason, or is it just some kind of strange fluke, really?
So could you give me the number of the contravention code?
Yeah,
One there.
Oh, no, sorry, we found it. We found it.
okay, all right.
Councillor Weinmark's looking for that.
Yes.
I just wanted to go back to your first question with regards to North Island. And I know that there's been a lot of problems there, especially in the summer months. And we have been working with Safer Community to see what we can do down there. I mean, sometimes when there's festivals there, the parking is horrendous down there, and we do get the civil enforcement down there as quickly as possible. But sometimes I know issuing a ticket is a deterrent, but we would rather prevent that from happening in the first place. And we're working with our Safer Community team to see what we can do there. And locking the park is one of them. But locking the park at North Island, it means they could still park up, you know, on the pavement, you know, the slip road that goes to the A40, they double park up there. So we are working closely with other teams to see exactly what we can do to prevent that happening in the future. And then your second question was regarding.
Got an answer.
With the second question regarding with the less challenges, is because with the probably I don't know, Mark, probably the quality of.
No, I've got to put my hand up. I'm really sorry. I think that we found an error in the table, and the number of PCNs is misaligned. So we will republish the report with the error fixed, but what you will find is you won't find a case where a particular contravention code has gone 1 in 1 year, 2 in the next year, and then 1,000. That's a misalignment of the table. And please, my apologies for that.
But the second question was regards to challenges. Challenges, and I think that with regards to that, councillor, I think the quality of the PCN and the accuracies of the PCNs now, because we keep on top of that, we were almost micromanaging them to make sure that the qualities are, and rather than them just giving it the PCN and it's inaccurate, because then obviously people are going to write in and challenge. But if the PCN is accurate and also they've got the pictures to back it up, camera doesn't lie, and also the accuracy of the PCN will prevent more challenges and representations coming in.
That's a very good news story, actually.
I think it'd also be fair to say that the LTNs were quite contentious,
Yeah,
and I think that probably resulted in a higher number of appeals than there might have otherwise been.
That's good. Actually, just to explain that, but it's actually a case of we're doing well.
Yeah.
That's. So there's any further questions on the.
I guess it's just it's not a question, it's more I see it's great that the parking report is here, I say that having sat through an open scrutiny for years, and I see why it needed to go to open scrutiny, but I submit that the only reason it was open scrutiny was because we didn't have a committee like this
Yes.
that allows you to go in depth into this series of questions. And if we're taking the environment and I know it's housing environment type, but intrinsic in environment is the art and transport question. And I just think some of the discussion that we've had tonight and some of the things that we've touched upon with the expertise of the different areas probably does lend ourselves to, and I, as a councillor for a long time, but not quite as long as Councillor Ball, I think all councillors recognise the responsiveness of our officers here and the transport and parking team. And I think we could make use of that in terms of coming up with some recommendations. I'm not saying, Chair, that all of your recommendations would be accepted by we'll get to that point. But I think the use of pre-scrutiny, so if we're going into, we're looking at ways for the service coming back in-house. I'm sure officers would welcome some input from councillors wider than this panel as well, in terms of where we can make little tweaks or serve our residents better in terms of setting up things that prevent interventions, things like that.
We'd probably call it an idea, with overview scrutiny, it's often we might have an agenda with quite a lot of items that we feel less likely to want to do more recommendations, because as you say, you're getting to death, but maybe this is another.
I was just thinking, well, with it being the environment as one of the focus, you can hit on 2 or 3 different areas of this, because there's parking, and very specifically this report is about parking. But some of the people who are concerned about the environment will be interested in how can we get traffic moving more frequently. We have so many Elizabeth line stations, we have that great asset now coming through, and as I alluded to earlier, one of Gina's other roles is helping us get through HS2 in your part of the borough that you represent, and in my part of the borough as well. And we've seen really innovative work that we can do as a council, even though we don't necessarily have power, we can sort of tweak that. And it's where you utilise those means of working. What about the residents' groups, touching on what and the expertise in the high street side. I just think there's a real opportunity to bring people together and take in scrutiny rather than in the council chamber or where people will be opposition. Have a look at some of these things, because hopefully this panel and this way of working with regards to scrutinising thematic will be something that we persist with in scrutiny. And then you can have a longer term look at some of these issues. As you've done previously with the housing, return to this in another year and say, oh, well, we looked at this last year with Gina and Park. This is the direction of travel. And well, Councillor Crawford said last year that lots of people are very upset about going cashless, but actually he was talking about so it's just to keep thematic and this thing.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. And before I forget, I should really thank you very much for all our hard work on the HS2 side with the benefit and stuff. So it's a pleasure.
Thanks.
So that means we'll move on then to looking at the scrutiny work programme. So I don't have a chance to look at that. If anyone have any points on the work programme they wanted to bring up. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, councillor.
Thanks so much.
Take a thanks, bye.
Thank you, Carol.
Nice to see you.
I was quietly listening to you people.
Very good.
Thank you, thank you.
Be in touch about the machines.
Right,
There's just a couple of ideas, yeah.
yes, there's looking at research around that there. But one thing that Councillor Martin brought up with the pre-agenda, was looking at maybe doing an evening customer journey case study. Was, I don't know if you'd like to perhaps briefly a little bit more about what you.
I think it'd be nice for us to actually see something where it gets picked up at a forum so that we can actually see how this forum works. So we actually see the problem be reported and let's follow it through and let's just see how it's dealt with.
Is there a specific problem?
Well, I think we could pick one, couldn't we? We could be sitting in one of the forums and actually say, right, is that something that we could look at? I don't know, let's make one up. I don't know, it could be
Let's not have one up, let's.
well, no, but we could have a condensation issue, we could have a heating problem, we could have an electrical issue. It's whatever that problem might be that is then reported at the community forum, and we then follow from the moment that that's reported, say at a community forum, or an issue, could be antisocial behaviour, it could be whatever it is, how it's dealt with, and just see how the departments all pull together internally.
Right, so in terms of like scoping this for when the job chair, the vice chair, and the scrutiny officer a little bit easier. Well, I think we should try and do that.
Oh, sorry, I can.
No, but in respect of what the issues we're talking about this evening, I think there are a couple of topics that easily lend themselves to the discussion we're having, right? So in housing, when we're talking about safety and parts of repairs, there's a very easy way of saying, right, how are we doing on fire safety in our different areas, because that's a piece of work that is ongoing and that will come back first to cabinet later this year and potentially to this winter. So we could look at a particular area of the borough where there's a problem, or where the self-referral has indicated that an area where we are looking to improve. I don't know, I'm thinking of, you will be more of an expert than me.
Yes, yeah.
But let's take this offline and.
Yes, so maybe what will happen is that when we next have a pre-agenda meeting, we can talk a bit more about that. We just want to make sure that we
We can follow up with some meeting.
now.
Let's have some email traffic between members rather than
Yes.
hearing us talk about it later.
Yes, yeah, it's good that we've had some input, because that's the whole point really of inviting other committee members to the pre-agenda, as well as Councillor Bourne and myself, is to make sure that what people get some input, get some more ideas themselves into what we're going to be doing during the year. So something to look at and see what kind of site visits we might think about, but that's well without. We did talk previously about maybe doing a few site visits to where people may be in properties and they've had issues in those properties themselves. But that's something I've done when I was on the housing scrutiny panel a few years ago. So these are things that we could talk about. But is there anything specific that you want to mention here, or is it something we can just do online pre-agenda?
Maybe it's something we can all take away and suggest some ideas for site visits based on our experience.
To be fair, we've actually got one going on Lord Green Ward at the moment where we are the freeholders of a block. And there's been a fire alarm issue. Now, to be fair, it's moved on and fire alarms are pretty much installed. But if I said to you it's something like that, probably got to look at.
Might be a good case study.
Yeah, and that's why that's the reason sort of saying it is to actually sort of, we've heard a lot today about how we are improving and how we are moving forward. So I'll take that up with you, and I'll find exactly where we are now, because I'm due to catch up with
There
Dawn.
might be some best practice
Yeah.
that can be learned
Yes.
from that one.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
right.
And that should really probably fit in quite nicely with some of the things that we've already been looking at, talking about the November meeting. So we'll still be more items that comes like housing repairs, the general state of the housing repair service. There's still ongoing things to discuss there. And there's also going to be ongoing issues about private housing sector, which is what we really want to.
So maybe if you're, if it's the November meeting and you're scoping that, perhaps you could say to the officer, could you give us some example, a case study that illustrates some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah.
So, because that, otherwise these are very broad areas. I understand why that report has to be so broad, because you're talking about trying to cover a huge area.
Yeah.
But if you can say, well, can you give us, it's in Northall or wherever it is, something that gives us an idea of the problem you're dealing with, how you dealt with it, and gives the outcomes of the solutions.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing that really came out of really under looking at the work programme is the fact that our meetings are quite bunched up together quite early on in the municipal year, and a lot of these issues are going to really come to fruition perhaps a bit later on. So we're trying our best to ensure that we make the most of the meeting time that we have. It does talk about the March meeting, for example, having an awful lot of material there already to the tenant satisfaction survey and property licensing, which are going to be big areas. But I do really want to include the transport strategy and ensure that we look at that, because that is going to be very key. And I think that's very good integral to what we're discussing here. We want some of these areas like beaches too, and these other transport.
Yeah, but I mean, those can come, those could be things that we mentioned and say, we can fit those in next year.
So we'll see, we can see what we can do to achieve that.
It's interesting because what I've been really keen on is trying to get an understanding of how we get around the borough and actually what parts of the borough don't have facilities like buses, transport, that sort of thing. So what we're trying to do, and it sort of follows the same sort of ethos, because again, it's the same argument I've always had with all agree, is that we are completely isolated because we have no bus service.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting talking to a few local residents recently, and they are desperate for the Slide bus service to come back, or the minibus service, but it's not coming back. So how are they supposed to get anywhere? So essentially, it's an environment issue. Now they've all got to drive in their cars. We're trying to get them out of the cars. We need to try. So if I said to you, there's a really good example of we're trying to get them out of the car, but how do we get them? How do I get them?
So that is something where when we come to look at the transport strategy, we scope the report to say, here is a particular issue, here are particular, I don't think it's indicating to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think it's stipulating that we've got his camera. I think we're probably need to.
Yeah, okay. All right, so in that case, then, yeah, so I think we all agree that transport strategy is very key. It's going to be an interesting meeting when it comes to March. It's going to be, I don't know, more people we may go with over time on that one, because it's going to be an awful lot of bits in. But I think it's going to be, we'll appreciate the opportunity to ensure we do our job properly.
And you can have something to information.
Yes.
Scope those reports technically, so you look at 2 or 3 areas.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Councillor Rickmore is not people right now. Okay, all right, so that's the case. All right, so I don't,
It's yoga.
Yeah, so Councillor Rickmore, they want to turn his camera off and be have further conversation. So the next meeting is the 23rd of November, and so